Good evening and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 11th of March. Good to see everybody here. Before we move into the formal agenda, I want to place on record my thanks once again to all staff who worked so incredibly hard on the budget that we were able to pass at our last full council meeting. Of course, that means that we've got the clear direction of travel for the next 12 months, and it sends a very clear message that Medway is continuing to function at the very highest level across all of the services we deliver every single day for the 285,000 residents that call this great place home. Apologies for absence. We've got two apologies for absence tonight from Cabinet members, and that is Luella Prenter and Simon Curry. Are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests? Nobody is interesting. Are colleagues happy for me to sign the record of the Cabinet meeting of the 11th of February? Yes. Fantastic. That then moves us on to the first substantial and substantive item tonight, the update on devolution and local government reorganisations. I'll move the recommendations as laid out in the paper, but I may wish to add to that as we go through the conversation tonight. I know colleagues will have some strong views on this. It's worth reflecting and starting this conversation recognising there are two processes going on across local government in England at the moment, and it's very easy to mix the two up, bring the two together, use the wrong name. People are human, that happens all the time. But just to be very, very clear, devolution is about additional powers to communities like ours, and the plan for the government is very clear. They've seen it as successful for many parts of the country. We clearly, as a community, along with our friends across the other parts of the region of Kent, wish to be at the front of that queue to get those powers here. Regrettably, that decision was not favourable to us. And as I've said elsewhere, we wish our colleagues, particularly our neighbouring colleagues in Essex and in Sussex well, and indeed further along the coast in Hampshire, who can, of course, we work closely with in some of the different parts of the local government family. So that's paused at the moment. We're seeking further clarification. We had one of our regular, very helpful catch-ups this afternoon between Kent and Medway as the two upper-tier authorities for the region of Kent, and as always, a positive conversation. Local government reorganisation, government's written to us and every council in two-tier areas of England to say they wish to make progress in moving towards a single tier of government for communities like ours. Now, of course, this is not new to us here in Medway. For 27 years, we have known that, we have appreciated that. Even when in opposition, every councillor that I have worked with on this council from a Labour and Co-Operative perspective have been strong advocates for the unitary authority model of governance for our community. Not a single councillor around this table would ever have picked up the phone and had to go, sorry, no, that's the other councillor for this area. We don't have to do that. And if you think about that, that's a pretty bizarre way of having to deal with things from a local government perspective. So unitaries are the best form of local government, in my view. And we would always advocate for that. And it's clear central government are doing that as well. That then leads us to a position where, of course, for the other 1.6 million people across the region of Kent, they have got two-tier council services at the moment, and government's been clear that they're moving away from that to that single-tier approach. So we have a couple of important deadlines that have been set for us by government. One of those is coming very quickly. That's in exactly 10 days' time, in fact, the 21st of March, where we have to give initial thoughts. It's a sense check. It's not detailed plans. And we've been very clear, we've heard that clearly both from civil servants and politicians, that this is a light touch approach. So we will be putting forward a position for Medway, but we will also be participating, because at this point it's important to highlight that we are aiming for this, certainly the first deadline in March, to have a collective position of the 14 councils saying that we wish to engage with this and making it clear some of the consensus view there is in this approach. There is an absolute consensus. I asked the question myself of leaders and chief executives at the end of last year when we had a meeting in Ashford. Not a single hand went up when the question was posed about a single council for the whole region of Kent. That would be one of the biggest councils in Europe, let alone in England. Not a single hand went up. It's worth saying that because historically, not really in Medway, but in other parts of the region, there have certainly been leaders who have advocated for that. I disagreed with them then, I disagree with them now. That is not the current leader of any council, including Kent County Council. It's worth saying that. So that's very, very clear. Actually, it's worth saying at that same meeting, I asked the question around 2 councils, and nobody's advocating for that. It's therefore clear that there will be views for both 3 and 4. And historically, over the last few weeks and months, this administration, this cabinet have been clear that the right direction is 4. And we will be working closely on that. We'll be putting that to the public to look at and get their views as we go forward. So we will absolutely, as well as that collective submission from the 14 leaders of Kent, we will be making our own submission as Medway Council, as I suspect a number of other councils will as well, making it clear at this point, we don't think there's any merit in a single council for the whole region. We also don't think, and this is one of the questions that we will have to answer in November, and I'll come to November shortly, we don't think there'll be any need for any council in our region to go over the boundary to another region. Now, of course, by the nature of Kent, that could mean going over some water to Essex or indeed to France. Nobody is proposing that. Genuinely, there could have been a conversation about partnering with colleagues in Sussex. There is no appetite for that whatsoever, particularly, I have to say, from those councils who could be most directly affected. It's very unlikely to have affected us here in Medway, but of course it's always worth hearing that. But again, not a single person has advocated for that. So I think at this stage, 10 days before this deadline, we already know 2 of the 3 key answers. We know it won't be a single council. We know we won't be going into other regions. And of course, that's really simple and straightforward for us in our region of Kent. But absolutely, for other regions across England, both of those are legitimate questions. There are some county councils which are substantially smaller than KCC, for example, so they may well be considering a single unitary option. There are several regions which, again, are still in the formation, where actually there may be a logic for some councils to go across 2 regions. So both of those are legitimate questions, but luckily for us, I would say, the answers are pretty straightforward for us in Medway. So we will make sure government knows that. Again, I suspect the Kent-wide submission will make that clear as well, but it's worth us saying that. We'll be advocating for unitaries, because again, as the only unitary authority in our region, absolutely. Have I agreed with every decision this council's ever made? No, unsurprisingly. But actually, it's always the best way to do governance, as I say. We will then go on a journey over the next few months of talking to our residents critically, talking to our key stakeholders. The Minister has offered to come down and see our region. I will certainly be taking him up on that offer. But I think it needs to be timed at the right timing, actually. Not now, not in the next 10 days before this initial submission, but to come and hear the views of residents and stakeholders, as well as key decision makers in local government. At the end of this process, there is a second part of this local government reorganisation that we would have to look at. The submission, as I say earlier on, is going to be from the 14 of us. The actual submission in November, which is the deadline for us, the 28th of November, that has to come from a principal council. So in theory, for our region, there could be up to 14 different submissions. Now, I suspect through time, through politics, there may well be less than 14. My instinct is probably 2, but time will tell. Now, of course, if there is consensus, and one can be submitted for the whole region, of course, that is an ideal, but realistically, some council leaders have been very clear they are absolutely fixated and determined to work towards 3, and they have legitimate reasons for that. I don't agree with those reasons. And they would probably say the same in reverse about my position on 4. In one sense, the maths makes this straightforward. Local government has been tasked to look at councils in the region of 500,000. We've got just under 2 million people here. 2 million divided by 500,000 equals 4. That's why I'm in charge of finance. So, yeah, the maths makes it clear that actually, particularly with growth, they're absolutely, having 3 councils, realistically, one of those could be in the region of 700,000. Now, a unitary authority of 700,000 is big, very, very big. So I think building that in would be a challenge. The final thing I would say at this point before I throw it open to colleagues is we continue to work hard on this. Of course, we're focusing first and foremost on service delivery for our 285,000 residents. Nothing has changed in that sense. Business as usual, absolutely clear. Those key projects, those manifesto pledges, the one Medway approach we have continued to advocate for, all of that continues. But at the same time, we're obliged, because government has asked us to, and every other part of England that doesn't have single-tier authorities, to look at this as well, which is part of the reason why at the January full council we allocated some resources, and I was grateful for very strong cross-party support at the January meeting. That was good to see. And we have set up as well alongside this the cross-party working group to look at local government reorganisation and devolution. So look, we're on a journey. I don't want to fall into 100 different cliches, but we are on a journey. Is it a journey this administration would have chosen perhaps on day one of when we took hold of the keys here in Medway? Probably not. But actually, if you care about local government, if you want local government to succeed, for me, there is only one game in town, and that's unitary authorities. So I'm pleased to see government moving forward ahead with this. We'll play our role. And then when we get to November, when I come back to my summing up, I'll talk about the process in November, because it's important to get that on the record as well. I'll pause at that point. Sorry, that's been a bit of a polemic conversation, but it's really important. And this is probably, I would argue, this is bigger than the changes 50 years ago. This is more, with devolution, this is a complete change for most parts of England on how we do governance for all of the powers we have today and more, which I think ultimately is about improving the life outcomes and life chances and quality of life for the residents of Medway and the wider region of Kent. Colleagues, questions, thoughts? Teresa.
Thank you, Vince, and I think I want to record my thanks to Richard and to our team of senior officers who've been very involved in this too, because we're really into month 4 of having a whole lot of extra work to do on top of the important things delivering for Medway. I want to support everything that you've said, Vince, to thank you personally for the leadership you've shown in this, not just to us, but for the rest of Kent, and continue to do. I think it's important to make people aware that we have set aside in our budget some resource for this work to be done. We'll be taking advantage of the offer from government to have support from civil servants as we go through the process. But I'm clear for the parts of the council that I'm responsible for that it won't be a distraction, that we will continue, in my case, to focus on care for Medway, wanting to build our own care home, building up adult social care with our restructuring and investment that we've put into it, making sure that public health addresses the needs of health inequality for everybody in Medway, and working hard with the voluntary sector as partners so that people get the services that they need. This is not an easy concept to explain to everybody, and that's no detriment to anybody listening. You have to be a local government nerd to care enough to sort of understand it. But it is important. It does affect people's lives, as you have said, and we want the best model that we can. We've got experience to offer this process as the only unitary authority in Kent, and we can demonstrate that we are close enough to the people we represent to understand their needs and hear their concerns, and big enough to make critical changes to the way services are delivered, to our infrastructure, and so on. So whatever the future holds, I think we've got good experience to bring to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the outcome is. As you said, would I have preferred not to be doing this at this time, 2 years into our administration? The answer to that is definitely yes. But I think the government have made a strong case for why they want to move ahead with this. And I don't want to be the only area in the country that isn't covered by devolution and the extra powers and resource and enhancement of our identity that it will hopefully bring. So I'm viewing this in a positive way. I'm looking forward to being part of the process. And by the end of the year, I guess we'll know where we are. And in the meantime, we've got lots of things to get on with.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Any other colleague? No? Excellent. Thank you. Before we move to the vote, worth just laying out what will happen at the end of this process. Thanks again to Bhupinder in particular for getting further clarification and confirmation. Both this decision, but importantly, the decision we will take in November is an executive decision. So in theory, I could sit in a room by myself and take that decision. But we don't do that anymore in this council. So we will be having a full council in early November. I think the final date is just to be confirmed. I think we're looking at the 13th, but that will be firmed up nearer the time. And that conversation and debate will then feed into the cabinet meeting scheduled for the 18th. Again, both of those dates are subject to final confirmation, obviously at annual council. But the important bit actually for the residents of Medway is between the 21st of March when we write to government and the 18th of November when we meet here, because that's their opportunity to share their views around what that could look like, their understanding as to what they want to see from their new council. One of the things that will come in that interim period will be a second paper from government on community governance. That will talk about not just parish and town councils and really value the work that group of individuals does for our communities across Medway, but wider community governance as well, looking at things like assets of community value, all of the things which have been wrapped up in other bits of legislation which I think will be brought together. So looking forward to seeing that as well, and we'll take that opportunity to seek views on how all of that impacts not just on the community of Medway, but the wider community that new council will be serving. It's worth finally saying before we move to the recommendations, we have a working assumption. It's right and appropriate to do that because if you don't have a working assumption, how can you be thinking about timescales, etc. So the current working assumption, although this is in part informed by the white paper, is that the shadow elections for the new councils, and again our preference as an executive is for 4 councils. Those shadow elections would be held in May 2027. There's a practical question mark around who would hold the subsequent election for the mayor, whether that would be the 13 districts, boroughs and the unitary, or whether it would be the new councils. But in theory, around the same point in May 2028, we'll have hopefully four new councils alongside a mayor. Now, again, that's not confirmed, but that's the current working assumption. And of course, that will mean, as I laid out in my paper to Jim McMahon when I wrote to him earlier in the year, that would mean that an expectation, if it was a 1-year extension, I don't think anybody in Medway would expect us to hold a set of elections for 1 year. Certainly at the end of that year, if the existing council ceases to exist. Now, again, those are working assumptions, they're not facts. But again, I know officers and cabinet colleagues and others have got those working assumptions in place. And as they change, if they have to, of course, we'll move that accordingly. So I'm going to move to the recommendations. I'm grateful for Habib confirming that he as chair of Business Support ONS, because of course it's technically from a scrutiny perspective sits under them, he's supportive of recognising this is an urgent decision. That was raised at the previous full council meeting, so I'm grateful for that. So I'll move the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3, and then I would add to that the recommendation that we will be seeking to advance the argument for 4 unitary authorities for the region of Kent, and that we will anticipate that final decision making will be made for through a informative council meeting, not a decision-making council meeting, although it will make a decision, and then ultimately this cabinet will make the decision that will allow any submission to be made in November. Are those recommendations agreed? Thank you very much, everybody. And again, it's never a wonderful item to start a meeting with, effectively an item which will cease the existence of this council. But we're doing the right thing and we're working hard. And I know from conversations with residents who are interested, and lots of residents aren't, as Teresa rightfully says, they just want to know what's happening with day-to-day services. Those who are interested are grateful that we're being so open and transparent. And of course, that's what we've always done and what we will continue to do. Let's then move on to the next item, the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. In Simon's absence, Alex is going to move this report. Thanks very much, Alex.
Thanks, Vince. I'm pleased to be presenting this on behalf of my colleague Simon Curry, who I know is very passionate about it. What I'm not passionate about are really terrible acronyms that you find all over local government. So the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan is known in local government circles as the LCWIP. I will do my best not to refer to it as that again this evening if I possibly can. What's important is not the acronym, but what it means. And what the plan does is it presents a comprehensive strategy for developing cycling, walking and wheeling networks in Medway over the next decade. Now, as with so much of what we do in Cabinet, and I've been really struck by this, and I've said it several times at these meetings, how much the work that we all do cuts across each other's portfolios. So although this is something that sits under Simon's portfolio, there's nothing in here that doesn't align perfectly with strategies and plans that I'm making in aspects of mine, and indeed that colleagues will be thinking of. So, for example, this plan aligns with Medway's broader policies and strategies, including the One Medway Council Plan, the Local Transport Plan, the Climate Change Action Plan, which all aim to promote sustainable travel and enhance quality of life for residents. But it's also just part of our greater commitment to creating clean, green, safe and connected communities. There's other policies that it fits in with alongside our Public Rights of Way Improvement Plan, Sustainable School Travel Strategy, and one that I'm particularly interested in, as you know, the Safer, Healthier Streets Initiative. And all of that work together creates a sort of drive towards a future where the instinct isn't always to get in our cars for journeys which could be better made, could be quicker made by active modes of travel. And that's not to say that in a place outside London where public transport is not where we would like it to be, and we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for devolution to potentially address some of those issues. So, you know, there will always be a place for vehicles in that transport plan, but where we are at the moment, I think, is quite remarkable in terms of the missed opportunities. That we've still got a situation where amongst journeys to work under 5 kilometres, so a park run essentially, the most common mode of travel is still car or van for 57% of people. Now, that's something that is probably for most people less than an hour's walk. It's about, you know, half an hour to run. We talk about couch to 5K programs, so that's the sort of distances that we're talking. Now that's not to say that that is suitable for everyone, and ability levels will differ, and that's an important consideration as well. But there's no question that some of those journeys, indeed many of those journeys, could be made in different ways and using active modes of travel. And we look at the examples around the world, and the places that spring to mind are places like the Netherlands, where active travel is a way of life. And, you know, I would say that they have a natural advantage over Medway in that the topography is somewhat flatter. And that's come out in the engagement work as part of the plan that we have here tonight. The fact that gradients matter, but there's something more fundamental about why it works in places like the Netherlands. It's because they've put the effort in, they've put the infrastructure in, and they've actually planned for it. That, you know, it's connected, and that's what I think the goal of this should be, is to have a much more connected, joined up way of thinking about those active modes of travel, that you don't travel along a nice wide pavement and suddenly be confronted with a really awkward crossing point that puts you in danger or perception of danger. So it's about rethinking all of these things from the ground up, but recognising that you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and that there has to be some level of prioritisation as well. So what this picks out are some key cycle routes, some key walking routes, not plucked out of thin air, but actually based on real-world data, based on lines of desire, the way that people do want to travel, the way that people currently travel. And I think that's a really good starting point. Now, what this also, what has to be pointed out here is that in itself, this isn't about delivering these projects. This isn't about we have this pot of funding that we can suddenly build 10 new cycle routes and these fantastic new pedestrian routes. That obviously is what we would like to be in a position to do. But the reality is, in order to apply for that funding, in order to either approach central government for the capital funding for projects like this, or to even allocate Section 106 money from new developments to make sure that actually, if a housing estate is built near you, that it delivers something for all residents, existing residents, new residents alike. And so to apply for those monies, you have to have a plan. There has to be a plan. And that plan can develop, that plan can change. Some of these designs that are set out in the report, quite high level. People, I think, understandably get quite animated about the specifics of certain proposals. But actually, you know, before we get to that stage, there's a long row to hoe, and we'll do that. So I think we shouldn't get hung up on the specifics of the routes and then the time it takes to deliver the funding that this might unlock. Those routes might change. The centre of gravity in Medway could shift between now and then. And I'm really pleased that the thinking behind this report will actually is capable of adapting to those changes, and it's set out a process of thinking about these things. Just, I won't say too much more just now, but just to point out that, you know, we're not starting from nothing in Medway. We have 81 miles of cycle paths already. We've got 200 miles of public rights of way that people can enjoy. These are really important aspects to freedom and enjoyment of leisure time, as well as a quicker route out of a car to get to the Medway city estate. It's about the things that make life in Medway worth living, and a lot of that already exists. And I think that there's an opportunity to improve on that, to expand on that. There has been some feedback which I absolutely sympathise with in terms of a dislike of some of the shared routes, so where pedestrians and bikes have to share what sometimes isn't as wide a footpath and cycleway as we might like. And we have to recognise that for people with disabilities, elderly people, people walking with children, people who are partially sighted, that's not necessarily a great starting point, but in some places needs must, and it's the question of whether you put cyclists onto the highway with cars that are arguably travelling in many cases too fast, or whether you share the space with pedestrians. I think that's the fundamental thing. This is about how we share the space that we live in, how we share it better, and certainly in all of that, pedestrians have to take priority over cyclists, and cyclists should obviously be giving way to them. But I think, you know, I absolutely concur with those who contributed in the engagement to having issues with shared footpaths. There's certainly one that I can think of on Corporation Street in my own ward, which is National Cycle Route 1, which is a shared path, and I think that's less than ideal. But I think the ambition of this local cycling and walking infrastructure plan is the potential to rethink these things, to do what we already do better, and to look ahead to a decade from now and where we would like to be. And where I think we would like to be is not to wring our hands and say, isn't it nice that they can cycle to work in the Netherlands and they can have lovely footpaths and be separated from traffic, and say, but that's not for the likes of us. That is for us. You know, nothing is too good for the people of Medway, and I think this report is the starting point to acting on these things, not saying that's not for the likes of us. It is for us, it will be for us, and that's what we aim to be with this plan over the next decade.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Alex, and thanks for using the acronym only once. Once is enough. I've got Tracy, please.
Thanks very much for that report. I think it's really important that we do encourage people to walk and cycle when they're able to. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that it's an easy choice for them to make, that it's a safe choice for them, and that they are able to do so without hindrance. There's a huge amount of data being gathered, some really good feedback from residents and other stakeholders. It comes as no surprise to me that 43% of respondents said that they would be more encouraged to walk if there was less street clutter and people parking on pavements. This is something I get emails about regularly, about footpaths being obstructed by vehicles. So it's great to see that we've identified routes where we're going to be starting to look at these issues. And I think the routes that we've chosen are ones that are really important. They're key routes which will be well used if they're attractive and easy and safe to use. So I think this is a great report, some really valuable information in it, and I really look forward to seeing what difference that makes to people in Medway and the choices that they're able to make to get around. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Teresa?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you, obviously, to Simon, who I know has worked incredibly hard on this and has been extremely passionate about it, actually, for years, including before we were in administration. And I concur with everything that you've said and everything that Tracy's said. Nothing should be too good for people in Medway. But it is important to remember we've already got some building blocks in place. I can think of the Rochester Community Trail, for example, the Strood Community Trail, you know, the different walking routes that are already being developed to give people alternative ways for walking around their area, the walking routes around St Mary's Island and back into Chillingham. You know, we have got some good walking and cycling routes on places that are actually easier to achieve for people of all abilities. And it's about taking the best of those and using the plan to move forward. And you're absolutely right. Of course, it cuts across all of our portfolios. For mine in health, I'm interested in giving people safe alternative ways to get around and making that as easy as possible for people, especially those people who live in more deprived areas and perhaps haven't got the advantage of having a car. And therefore, if the walking routes in those places can be made safer and nicer and more attractive, that's important. And this stretches into our new neighbourhood plans, right across the whole of the authority, into the design code, like the design code that we've got for Chatham, where there are places to stop and play and sit down when you're walking right through. And overall sending a message, particularly to developers as we come to the local plan, that this is the kind of area that we want. So I think, that it's not something to just put on the shelf or hold in a file in the computer. It's a live, important document that, as you say, Alex, we can expect to refer to in all sorts of ways from all sorts of different angles to show that actually we're ready for new things that can happen. And when opportunities come forward, we've actually put the work into making sure that we can demonstrate that we've got deliverable and resilient plans to take some of these things forward. And so nobody left behind in terms of safe walking and cycling. We've got a long way to go, but having ambition is really critical, and it's good to see this report in that context today.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Adam?
Teresa's is on.
Oh, sorry.
Again, yes, better. Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you for presenting the report for Simon. I just wanted to mention 2 or 3 aspects which like occurred to me. One is that I'm aware of the volume of existing Medway Healthy Walks programme which takes place across Medway, so Gillingham, Chatham, Rochester, sometimes in and out of the adult education centre at like Rochester, Gillingham Library, etc. And those are regular walks. If you want to go onto the website, you can find out about them, that they walk the same route every week, but it's a social thing, and it's so it's like comradeship as well as obviously walking, which is good for us all. I also like to declare an interest because I'm a member of the Medway Ramblers, and that every Sunday has a weekly walk which is led by a volunteer, typically elsewhere in Kent. So unfortunately we have to take a car in order to get to where the walk starts. But there's also, I've recently started walking with the Medway Towns Footpath Group, and they do primarily walk across our plentiful footpaths within the Medway area, and of course other footpaths elsewhere within Kent. I was also reminded of back when I was a lad and my father was working in Holland, that we had some car-free Sundays because of the then Iran oil crisis, etc. And once every so often there was no traffic allowed within Holland at that time. It was all part of being able to save on the amount of petrol that we're having. And I was reminded of those days when we had COVID, and again we didn't have so much traffic and you could hear the birds singing and everything like that. We are sooner or later, despite the incumbents in the White House saying burn baby burn, and all that kind of thing, it's very, very short-sighted. So yes, I'm a firm advocate of walking, and I'm happy to support this. Another memory I've got from when I was living briefly in Holland is they did have separate routes for walking, but also cycling, and they have a verb in the Dutch language which means to get one's bicycle tyre caught up in a tram. So it just goes to show that that kind of cross fertilisation of various methods of walking. And I'm very pleased to declare that I enjoyed a 25-minute brisk walk coming from North Gillingham across the Lower Lines Park and through the campus, and it was fantastic. It really got me into the mood for this meeting this evening. So I fully endorse that strategy. Thank you.
Excellent. I can't see anybody else, so before I go back to Alex, absolutely recognise this is another example of a great report to read. And again, I'd want to pay tribute to the comms team, actually. The quality of the physical documents has really improved in recent times. obviously I'm obliged to say what's going into it as well as improved under our administration, but actually they're very readable, and for people who are interested, you know, easily accessible. And that's what we want. We don't want kind of beware of the leopard style documents that nobody can engage with. So really pleased with that. So huge thanks to the comms team. And the content of this is fantastic. Lots of stats to understand why we're taking the decision we're taking. And Alex, you make a really critical point in saying, we know today what Medway looks like, what Medway's doing. What we don't know is what it looks like in 7 years' time or 9 years' time. But this plan gives us that flexibility and principles to have those conversations with those new parts of Medway that perhaps aren't here today, but certainly will be, not least being delivered because of our local plan, which we will bring forward later in the year. So absolutely welcome this document, and huge thanks to everyone who played their part in the consultation and indeed to scrutiny. And that's the final point I'd raise before I come back to you. Scrutiny raised this point, and you raised this in your opening remarks. It's absolutely, for a 10-year document, it's absolutely fine to have the ambitions and recognise it will mean the work of hard-working officers and partners and the voluntary sector potentially, and keen groups working collaboratively to sometimes bring that funding in, whether that's through grant funding, Section 106 and others. So we now know what we want to do and when we want to do it, and we know that there will be opportunities, and actually having a document of this nature will mean we're more likely to succeed in those opportunities when they come over the next decade. Alex, back to you.
There we go. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. Actually setting out the capability of this council to deliver on something like this is absolutely key. And we've seen that where we have blazed a trail with, certainly blazing a trail outside of major metropolitan areas on school streets, and seeing even, you know, Greater Manchester following in our wake on that. But it counts, because that is noticed. You know, when we have our senior officers attending conferences, talking about what we're doing, and that is what creates the impetus for the funding that we need to deliver these things. So I think that's absolutely critical. It's not about blowing our own trumpet, although that's absolutely important to do in that context. We should be proud of what we achieve here, but also we are showing pride in it, because that is what gets the attention of central government and gets us notice and gets the cold hard cash. Just want to pick up on what Tracy said about less street clutter, and I think that's really important. And I actually put my name to a letter to Jim McMahon, the Minister for Local Government and English Devolution, that was co-signed by Cabinet members of all parties across England, requesting that the ability to tackle pavement parking, the powers to tackle pavement parking, should be part of the English Devolution Bill. Now, for reasons set out by Vince, that's slightly delayed in this parish, but nonetheless, as and when those powers come, and they're not appropriate everywhere, that's not to say that we're talking about a blanket ban on pavement parking in areas where that's simply not possible. But I was really struck at Labour Party conference last year by representations from groups such as the Royal National Institute for the Blind about just the challenges that street clutter and pavement parking can cause to people with impaired vision. So really important that, you know, this walking and cycling infrastructure plan is not just for the able-bodied, that it's delivering for everyone. You know, we mentioned the shared paths, but I think, you know, there are powers which we don't yet have that we need to tackle these things. But, you know, I want to assure residents that I'm on the case, and I'm demanding that we get those powers and that we have the capacity to tackle them. I would also just to revisit school streets, because I can never talk about school streets enough. But the fact is, in this talk about our plans and about attracting future funding, That's an example of something that this council is doing right now to deliver safer walking and cycling journeys near schools. You know, a critical part of that mosaic that we've seen in these fantastic, the fantastic report that Vince has paid tribute to. You know, but those journeys, the ones where far too many young people are injured or worse on their way to and from school. So it's again, it's not about wringing your hands to say, oh, well, it would be nice to turn the clock back, and if only we could. Well, no, actually, we're saying we're drawing a line that is, you know, behaviour by motorists that's unacceptable, and we're cutting it out, and we're making those routes safer for everyone. Because in my view, those safe walking routes, that's an issue of social justice. That's about the right to leave your house and be safe in your community and be able to walk freely and go where you please. And, you know, for too long, and, you know, you've got, you know, Muppets like the guy in the White House that Adam has referred to that, you know, claim to be on the side of the people, but, you know, who then gets into his, well, I don't know what they call the beast. I don't know if it's called Road Force One or whatever. But, you know, these are people who are so, the sort of car culture is so ingrained. And this is not about being anti-car, but it's about being responsible in all our transport decisions. Because, frankly, you know, as you're talking about a sort of fuel crisis, I guess, in the 1970s, where people were trying to save petrol because there was a crisis in the Middle East. Why in the middle of a cost of living crisis would you burn fuel for a journey that could be made just as quickly on foot, leave you with all the health benefits, particularly if it's a journey with your children, you know, those treasured moments with young people walking to and from school. Why would you not do that? That it would be illogical not to, and yet all the stats that we've brought out in this report show that for far too many people, those really short journeys are being made in motorised transport. It's balmy. Why would you not save the money? Why would you not save yourself the stress? Why would you not play your part in cutting down congestion in Medway? You know, the naysayers who are always going on about congestion in Medway, well, this is part of the solution. Part of the solution is taking personal responsibility for the transport decisions you're making. You know, when we've got a report from government in 2020, and I know it wasn't our party who was in government in 2020, but a report called Gear Change set a goal of having 50% of journeys in towns and cities being made by active travel by 2030. I think that's a laudable ambition. This report is a step on the way to getting there. I want Medway to get there before then, and certainly this will give us the very strong case for the funding to do so. So with that, I would ask colleagues to support the recommendations at point 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. Are those recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Brilliant, thank you. Let's move on. Regional Care Cooperative update. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Vince, and I'm very pleased to present this report. We have this report this evening because in July we asked that this report would come back because there's been a lot of partnership working going across the other 18, I think it is, authorities who have joined in. There's only one authority in the South East which has chosen not to join in, and that's Hampshire. And really, it's a way of us tackling the social care market by working in collaboration, improving the quality of our placements and getting value for money for those placements by working collaboratively and cooperatively, which is part of the name of the group, which I'm proud to be on the ruling group within Medway, Labour and cooperative. There's no Labour in the regional care collaborative, but you know, basically there are opportunities that come out of this. So it started off as the Department for Education Pathfinder, and we're paying £75,000 revenue towards staff you know, needed to work on this, working across the region. And that levers in £1.03 million capital grant funding in this current 25/26 year that we're about to have. And that money is going to go, well, threefold. First of all, Eden House cabin project, and works underway to get designs completed and to appoint a building partner, hopefully by early spring. And obviously, Alt Even is the other major part of this, which is there was renewed planning permission granted in January, and we're going out to tender for an architect and drawing up plans by April of this year. And there's going to be consultation with stakeholders, including parents, carers, and young people, to inform the design of these important buildings. And the third aspect of it is that there's going to be further opportunities for some matched funded capital grant schemes for specialist areas, and those are going to become available later in the 2025-26 year. Any future bids will need to be in line with Medway's sufficiency strategy, a place called home. And if I can also encourage people to do some bedside reading, because it fits in with the national strategic initiatives in children's social care. So there's the independent review of children's social care. There's a final report, and there's links to that within this report. And also children's social care, stable homes built on love. They're both actually surprisingly readable documents and really person-centred. So I think most people would find it easy to digest that. So what are the priorities of the regional care cooperative? Data sharing, placement availability, workforce is really important here, and obviously complex care and just the collaboration working across the southeast. So I'd like you to note this report, and I should imagine that we'll be having a further update, and we'll leave it to the officers. I'd like to thank the officers for their work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Any other colleague? Tracy?
Thank you very much for this update, Adam. There's a lot been going on with the Regional Care Cooperative, so it's really good to have this brought back to Cabinet so that we can see that progress that's been made. I think that it's a really great example of what collaboration can do and how we can improve things for young people in care in Medway and across the South East region. And clearly, as you've already said, we are reaping the rewards for a £75,000 investment. We've got just over £1 million worth of funding coming in, which is going to be helping us with Eden House and All Even, which is going to help provide good quality accommodation for some of our young people. And of course, there's going to be more grant streams coming into the next financial year that we will be able to look at and to bid for there as well. And as you were saying, this collaboration is really focusing on some of the key issues involved in the social care market, which has caused real difficulties, but working together to be able to share and trade availability of placements to make sure that we've got a good quality, qualified workforce, that we are able to continue improving provision for children in care in Medway and across the region is a really good move, and I'm so pleased that we're part of it. And I'm quite amazed that we haven't got all local authorities part of this, but we're making great strides with it, so thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Nina, please.
Thanks, Adam, for the report. I am very supportive of this regional care cooperative as well. Thank you for the update. And there is, at long last, a recognition of the real challenges in children's social care, and something innovative needs to be thought about how to address these issues. And I'm pleased that Medway is part of the cooperative. And, you know, many of the children who come into care would have experienced adverse childhood experiences, and they do need properly trained staff members as well as social workers and foster carers. So I think, you know, by having a cooperative where we are exchanging good practice models and equipping carers with the therapeutic skills to support the children is something that we would totally welcome. So happy to support. Thanks.
Thank you, Nina. Before I go back to Adam, I'd say a couple of bits. As a labour and cooperative administration, we absolutely should be involved in as many cooperatives as possible. And Tracy is right. It's surprising to see anybody from an upper tier perspective in this region not being part of that. And if anybody is currently a member and thinking of leaving, I would say that's a wrong decision for their council. You know, we work collectively in this challenging area. There's absolute recognition that for upper tier authorities, this is a massive challenge. So my goodness, why wouldn't we want to use the collective power of that voice for local government in the South East? And I want to reiterate the point I made at the budget setting meeting, which is, of course, this is part of that journey, and Tracy made reference to this, and Nina as well, particularly recognising the work that we've done as a cabinet in that support for foster carers, particularly those who are working directly with us, choosing to work with us rather than working with an independent organisation. I want them to choose us, because I want us to be working with them closely, not for the sake of it, not for the financial situation, actually for those young people who need the very best support. So thank you for bringing this report. I suspect at some point, like everything else in the world at the moment, there probably will be a conversation about LGR, and of course, as and when that happens, very happy to take that as a conversation thread, both here for Cabinet, but also for the working group and elsewhere across the organisation. So thanks for your update, and back to you for the final words, please.
Yeah, and also just to make a link with the work of the Medway Corporate Parenting Board, and thanks to an initiative with the Young Lives that Foundation, I've been part of a reverse buddy scheme, which involves fortnightly conversations with a matched looked after child. So myself and the young lad that I've been twinned with, we enjoy a 20-minute conversation, could be longer, and we can talk about anything that we want to, football, you know, trainers, etc., this, that, and the other. But it's about improving my awareness as to what it's like as a looked after child, and to improve the looked after child's awareness as to what the life of a corporate parenting is. So it's by having that dialogue. You know, maybe it's kind of like monitored once every 3 months or so, but the person that was sat in my second conversation said that she was going to leave it because she could see that we were getting on really well. And so if we keep that dialogue going, and we can work wonders around things like planning, making sure that we get our, new homes identified for our care leavers as well. It's really, really important. So we can join all of that up, but you know, thank you to James for the work that he's been doing on the regional care cooperative. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, showing loud and clear, not just a sentence in a report, children matter in Medway, and this is another example of that. Are colleagues happy to support the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. That moves us to the Town Centres Board revised terms of reference. Harinder, over to you.
Thank you, Vince. On to my favourite item. Reason being, we want to I'm asking us to revise the terms of reference for town centres. That's important because town centres are important to this administration, and to declassify the Town Centre Board as a Cabinet Advisory Group, and that's important because we're going to help reduce unnecessary administration and unnecessary bureaucracy, and as everyone knows, I'm very much in favour of that. So the way that this will be working is to give the Town Centre Board the support that it requires by making sure that the membership is refined and up to date, so that will allow for senior officer levels support, as well as a protocol for deputisation for supporting the board, and also to pass it through the Cabinet to declassify the board as a Cabinet Advisory Group, as well as making sure that members or councillors from town centres are invited, at least one are invited, and that allows, practically speaking, it to be a non-party political basis with which we'll be going forward. So fully support this and hope everyone supports the recommendations as set out.
Thank you very much indeed, Harinder. Any colleague? No? So it's worth saying, obviously, when we took control of the council, just on the declassification, because that might be a bit confusing to people who are looking on. So when we had inherited this, we were given the opportunity to serve, the previous administration had a long list of cabinet advisory groups. Lots of that work was important work, but it didn't need to be a cabinet advisory group. We took the decision in our first few days to say, actually, this is such a critical issue for us as an administration, we'd want to do that. In further conversation, it's quite clear this work continues to be really important. Actually, the improved membership, you know, with those senior officers from the corporate management team now being part of the formal membership, I think that sends a very clear message. But the structures that come with it being a cabinet advisory board are bureaucratic. So I think the layout in point 3 and point 4 are very, very helpful. Of course, recognising it's important, whoever the ward members are, of course they will get an invite, one from each of the 5 towns. We're in a situation at the moment, for example, where a couple of those individuals happen to be cabinet members as well, but they represent, you know, wards which are one of the 5 towns. And as you say, at the moment, rightfully, because of the political makeup of those 5 wards and under the Boundary Commission's accepted warding for this council, every town centre now is within 1 ward. A very sensible map of Medway, if you ask me. The final thing I'd say before I hand back to yourself, Harinder, is to say the important role of town centre forums, and they're different across the 5 towns. I know that your predecessor was doing a little bit of work around kind of a uniformed approach to that, and that's something we may want to look at again, certainly alongside the really important work you're doing on things like the market strategy as well, those things which will really create those town centres which we all are working hard to deliver. And actually, with the report that Alex moved earlier on, getting people to our town centres in a number of different ways, I think would be very, very positive indeed, and that report will help with that as we move forward. So thanks for your work on this, and thanks to officers for getting this into a position. Absolutely, we only had 5 pledges. This directly results in positive moves actually on 2 of them. So we really welcome this update. So back to you.
Nothing to say other than to move the recommendations as set out.
Thank you very much indeed. Are those recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. That then moves us on to the next item, which sits with myself, which is the Household Support Fund. Happy to move the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1. You'll see there's some detail in there, particularly around we're waiting for final confirmation of the potential reporting back up to government. And it's worth, let's start right at the start of this. You know, colleagues will recall that we had to take through council, through Tracy's excellent work, a clear request for government to keep, the previous government, to keep Household Support Fund going. And we were left till the very last minute. Compare and contrast that to Liz Kendall, who was very clear months in advance of saying, yes, it'll be in place for the following year. And I think the only reason it wasn't longer than that, realistically, is because it's likely to be part of that multi-year settlement, almost certainly. And I think that's a good thing. I think we have a really strong track record as to using this fund effectively, whether that's, of course, free school meals, and it shouldn't have taken well, he still plays for Aston Villa, but a Premiership footballer, other football clubs are available, to prick the conscience of the country when it comes to holiday hunger. We know, because of the wards we represent, that has continued to be a real and present issue, but actually this fund has reduced the risk of that. Not to zero, but much reduced the risk of neglect through those summer, particularly the summer holiday, that's 6 weeks away from the kind of sanctity of school when it comes to the issue of hunger. And of course, we're seeing very shortly the rollout of the first breakfast club, one of the trailblazers here in Medway, really happy, and I look forward to visiting that school in due course. The Household Support Fund as well has made sure that individuals and households in difficulties, they've had the opportunity to bidding for everything from, white goods to if they need a new pair of shoes or anything else. That opportunity is there for them to step forward. And actually, there are great examples, and I pay huge tribute to Gemma Gilly and her whole team, award-winning team. There are great examples where a small amount of funding through the Household Support Fund has actually saved the taxpayers, in some cases, thousands of pounds because of that small intervention, and the flexibility around it has led to that really positive outcome. So I'm really proud of the work they've done, and of course it's worth talking about the food partnership as well. Again, recognised regionally and nationally. I know, Teresa, through your excellent leadership, particularly in the public health area politically, that is seen as an exemplar elsewhere. So look, I'm really proud of the work that this council has taken forward with the Household Support Fund. Whatever the decisions about it this time next year, and I say my instinct is it will probably cease to exist as a standalone grant, but will be made up as part of the wider multi-year settlement for councils like Medway. If we get that extra flexibility, the one thing I know will happen is even further positive outcomes for the residents, often vulnerable in Medway, individuals and families of all ages. I'll pause at that point. Happy to take any questions or comments. I've got Tracy, then Teresa.
Thank you very much. Obviously, really pleased to see this come forward. I think it is a relief to residents in Medway to know that that's in place, and compare that with last year where we waited to the 11th hour and people were actually worried of where they might be if they landed up in crisis. It's a fund which can be used flexibly to support those who find themselves unexpectedly in need. And the majority of grants are actually really small, but they make a huge difference to those people who are given it, who without that support would really be stuck to know what to do. Of course, especially pleased that we're able to continue to support pupils who are eligible for free school meals during the holiday periods, which is going to help out so many Medway families on low income. So very happy to see this come forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Teresa?
Yeah, I mean, echoing everything that everybody's said, it's the continuity and stability of this that's important. I wish we didn't have to have it, but we're not out of the woods yet with the cost of living crisis. And it links, as Tracy is saying, to being able to provide free school meals during the holiday periods. It links to our holiday activity and food strategy. Got another fantastic programme planned for the Easter holidays, and we have been able to do that because we've had good advance notice from the government. Today, I was at the Alzheimer's and Dementia Support Service, one of their dementia clubs that they run in Struden in Finsbury every month, a fantastic charity. In their case, for this particular event, supported by the Masonic Lodge in Gravesham. And it's that kind of activity. There were over 60 people there, so people who have got Alzheimer's and dementia, and their family and friends, some of whom who had brought them along, enjoying a really good afternoon with fun activities to do, as well as a talk, actually, about keeping your house warm. And one of the things that was mentioned in that talk was Medway's Household Support Fund. And I'm very pleased to say that our welfare and benefits team have agreed to go across and see the club and work with the people there. And I was able to make a short speech to everybody. And one of the things I said is, I want the council to be a warm, friendly face, a source of help to you. And I want to hear from you about the things that we can do better, almost everything I said before anybody else said that, because we've always got to have more ambition. But it was well received. People had heard that the council would help them when they were in need, and there were some people who'd been recipients of grants. So I think that's an example of where people are supporting themselves, they're going along to something, getting themselves there, getting mutual support, making new friends, hearing information from that charity, and expecting that the council is going to be there to join with them in the way that I was able to this afternoon. So in those small ways, as you've said, Tracy, this is important. It gets people out of a bad situation quickly and does so in a non-judgmental way. And I think that is a really critical thing and something to be quite proud of. If it wraps into everything else, I think we need to find ways of continuing to do it, because when you feel that you're supported, that makes you feel more confident and gives people that hand up to go on and do something else. If you're always worrying about something, your ability to get yourself out of the situation that you're in and make things better is commensurately reduced. So I'm very pleased to see it and to support it today.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Nina?
Thanks. I'm also very much in support of this, and I do welcome this news as well about the continuation of Household Support Fund. Alongside what Tracy and Teresa have already covered, I do believe that sometimes Household Support Fund, if given at the right time when a person is in crisis, can actually help the problem from escalating further. So it has proven to be a vital lifeline at times to those in dire financial need. And the flexibility is something that is also welcomed by residents. And I would also like to mention that Household Support Fund, at the moment, because of how proactive our department, Gemma and her team, have been with regards to promoting this to families suffering like economic hardship here in Medway. I think the message has gone out to our community, and I do regularly see residents supporting others or signposting them to the council website saying this is where you can approach for, Household Support Fund, and it has been really helpful for us. So I would like to thank those community members as well for supporting one another in that regard. Yes, and I am totally in agreement with Tracy as well that, in terms of prioritizing those who are already in receipt of benefits, as well as the holiday activities fund, I think those are really, really key to us making sure that these funds are also reaching to our communities most vulnerable. And because of all of those, I'm very much in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, and thanks, Tracy and Teresa, for your fantastic comments. Teresa, I absolutely agree with you. I wish the household fund didn't have to exist. I wish the organisations we help through the food partnership, most of them, I wish they didn't have to exist, but they do, and therefore, thank goodness it's there, and thank goodness we've got that collaborative approach to supporting our most vulnerable individuals and families. Nina, you are absolutely right. I think, I think we've taken a really proactive approach in the last 22 months, and I'm proud of that. One or two people might put hilarious comments underneath 1 Minute Medway, but actually most people are using that as a source of information, sharing that, and importantly, sharing the information from both that and things like the council website, the cost of living plan. Those things are regularly shared, particularly on Facebook. So yes, I'll take the occasional brickbat and reference to goodness knows what, if it means that lots of people are getting that advice and guidance. And again, I think for me, it's about being reactive and proactive, and Gemma and the team have done that and continue to do that. I think the most obvious example in one sense, at a time when our government had to make a really tough choice around winter fuel payment, it was this council, Teresa, under your leadership from a public health and adult social care perspective, working with the team there to ensure we were able to get to nearly 1,600 residents to make the difference. And again, some of those residents taking time out to thank the team, thank cabinet members and others. And I say, look, I wish we didn't have to do that, but we had to. It was the right thing to do. And again, Household Support Fund was absolutely used in a right and appropriate way to make those things in place. So yes, whatever happens, whether it does continue as a bespoke funding stream or gets put into a wider pot. Rest assured, as long as this administration is here and as long as there is still a need, whether there is a formal household support fund funding stream or part of that wider multi-year settlement, the important work will continue. And I'm really pleased that we haven't had to go with the begging bowl like we had to under the previous Conservative government to make sure our most vulnerable residents are getting that support. On that basis, are we happy to support the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1? Those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Let's then move to item 9, Innovation Park Medway Next Steps. Harinder, over to you.
Thank you, Vince. I have a slight resentment of this item because it makes me feel old. I'm quite used to, in local government councils, talking about things that have happened way back when, and I'm like, yeah, I wasn't born then, you're old. But I actually remember when this started, and that is really, really upsetting. It's, 2014, 11 years now this has been in the making, so let's just put that in context. But this is not about me. The main thing I want to talk about is that we inherited a situation that was poor. It was a poor situation that we inherited. We faced some fundamental issues with the site. The fundamental issues, even on a practical level, we had issues with drainage, we had issues with landscaping. Essentially, it was unusable for business. So we went and fixed that. We did that straight away. And then we went out and looked actually what are the offers for the site, and there were no real credible offers for the site. And that is incredibly concerning when you're taking up an administration for the first time and you look at the books, and there's like this massive issue that you have there, and you've got to face it head on, and that's what we did. So that's what we're doing now as well. And I appreciate that we had the pandemic, and that shifted working patterns and behaviours towards work, and how that was, with working from home, and how that sort of changed the landscape and the market. But even prior to COVID, take-up was difficult. And after COVID, take-up was difficult in terms of attracting people to Innovation Park Medway. So it is concerning that the previous administration either were not able to change tack fast enough or to react or give a new direction, but that's what we were left with. So we've taken steps straight away. Actually, we paused development after we've, with ongoing fixes to the drainage as discussed, we paused the development, had a look at what our options are, and went and got outside help, the expertise that was required to see what are our options and how can we best get the best value for taxpayers in Medway. And that's what we've done. And the Cabinet report that you have in front of you is the result of a lot of fantastic work from officers, especially I'd like to put my thanks on the record for Tay as well, and the consultants that helped out, who really focused on the direction that was given to them about a sustainable future for this site. It gives us the details that we really need to push forward with it. And we undertook a market review with market research to give us the decisions that we have in front of us. We also came across and realised that the LDO, or the Local Development Order, essentially the rules which govern what was allowed to be developed on there or not, it's just too restrictive. So we're having to push to get rid of that LDO, to revoke it, and use our local plan to take precedence. It also saves money. We anticipate these plans are going to provide a significant cost saving. And what we have are two split options, two sites, as the site is split with a northern and a southern site. The northern site we're recommending an approach with mid-tech, so something a bit more open than what the previous set of plans were providing. So it's still looking at use of industrial or medium-level technology, which really gives us the scope to get the best value for the land there. And with the southern site, with option 3, with a care home there, that plan being the best option because, frankly put, we need better and more higher quality accommodation for older people in Medway, and that, as an administration, is a priority for us. And so we're acting on that with this recommendation because we recognise the pressure is there, and no doubt there'll be other councillors here that will want to talk about that. And sort of moving on, I'm really, really pleased to announce here today and for everyone listening online, hopefully, that we have agreed, subject to all the legal agreements falling into place following this meeting, to lease a short lease over 12 acres of land of the northern site to help support BAE Systems' multi-million-pound upgrade in Medway. So that's the first time that's being announced. That is our largest private employer announcing plans to invest 220 million for a state-of-the-art factory and a significant renovation of their factory in their current site, which will be hopefully bringing 300 high-quality jobs over the next 5 years on top of what is already a 1,700 strong workforce. And if we're talking innovation, it's difficult to think of any company as innovative as the BAE Systems or a company with such strong roots in our community, and I'm so very, very, very pleased to strengthen those ties. This is a clear example of where we have an administration that actually talks to our employers, that has gone out, openly discussed with the very obvious candidates for that site about what we can do in partnership, which I'm led to understand was severely lacking previously. So I'm very pleased to announce this for the first time. We'll be moving forward with these plans, and we'll be moving forward the recommendations, hopefully, if colleagues agree, and we'll be looking to develop on the options provided as well as the newly announced lease with BAE Systems. So I'm very pleased to recommend. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Harinder, for that excellent news and opening for this item. Happy to take contributions as always. Teresa, please.
Sorry, I still had my mic on again there. But, I mean, look, Harinder, congratulations to you for the leadership that you have shown on this, and in fact to your predecessor as well, who in the early days of this administration recognised that something was going wrong, and Councillor Curry as well. I think it's really important to give him the recognition that he deserves in determining that we open this up. This was about organisational honesty and political honesty as opposed to dogma. The thing had stalled for all of the reasons that you had said, but I think as well because of an unwillingness to change, an unwillingness to take on the sort of organisational humility that you need when it's important to change direction. And that has happened now. I'm delighted, of course, about the care home. And I'm very, very pleased for BAE Systems, because actually the way things are in an increasingly unstable world, they have got a part to play on that world stage. And they're doing that in an ethical way, in partnership with lots and lots of other people, and always with the eye. 68% of their workforce come from Medway. I had a very good conversation with some of the workforce who live in my ward very recently, and their enthusiasm for the future, their determination to make their new factory into a modern workplace. There's hopes there to have a gym on site, to have a cafe, to have other things that enhance working life and help people's work-life balance, as well as innovating. And their portfolio is very wide. They're making new engines for electric buses, as well as all of the other things that they are making, and have even had a scheme where they've had retired engineers returning to work to show the engineers of the future. share their skills and transfer them to the many different things that are going on there. So that really is great news for Medway, but I think it shows real leadership and determination to make something work. It's no longer a white elephant, it's got a real future. And there will be reach into all parts of our community through that site. It won't be what the previous leader of the council wanted it to be, a great big concrete runway with not much else going on. That has changed. It's going to be something that is really good for Medway. And I'm very pleased that you're able to announce that tonight.
Thank you. Before I bring in Alex, Hona, was it a point of clarification at this point, or did you want to pick it up at the end? Okay, thank you. Alex?
Thanks, Vince. I just want to echo Teresa's comments about what fantastic news it is to have an employer bringing quality jobs to Medway. That really is a fantastic thing to have brought to Cabinet tonight. And I had the privilege of visiting BAE Systems a few years ago and seeing some of the incredible tech, the head-up displays and you know, real cutting-edge technologies. And it's quite remarkable when you step into that sort of world that seems like science fiction, and it's about a mile up the road from your house. It's quite incredible and great that they have the opportunity to expand in Medway, and it's having that agility to change tack, to, you know, you would have the perception from the previous administration that Medway Council was an oil tanker that couldn't possibly ever change direction. And I think, you know, that I listened to Harinder on BBC Radio Kent this morning explaining what had happened with Innovation Park Medway and the sort of chronology, and it was quite instructive, but there was also, for me, a sense of deja vu, and it's things of perhaps lesser import and slightly less expensive, but I think of the years of ploughing on with things that weren't working. It was the hallmark of the previous regime, things like, you know, spending £1 million over a series of years to prop up castle concerts subsidised by taxpayers that clearly weren't working in that format. But there was no one that had the nerve, the grip to say enough. You know, the best time to have drawn a line under some of this project would have been 5 years ago, when it was apparent that it wasn't a case of build it and they will come. They weren't coming. You know, the next best time to draw a line under it is today, and to actually say we're moving on to a different stage. You know, we've referenced American politics a few times tonight, and the symbol of the Republican Party is the elephant. I think the symbol of the previous administration should be the white elephant, because, you know, that's absolutely the sort of thing that they were doggedly pursuing. Make it work, ignore all the naysayers and ignore all common sense. And I think that's part of a problem. You know, we saw it at the budget meeting recently, that it's still a refusal to grasp the nettle on so many things, to accept the new realities that we face. And that's something that this administration is not afraid to do. And I think that's helped by the fact that this is not a cabinet or a Labour group filled with amateur captains of industry who always think they know best, that we're prepared to ask experts, whether it's the expertise that Harinder has relied on in drawing up this report, whether it's SIPFA. You know, it's about saying we don't have all the answers. Not only that, but when we are told answers that we might not want to hear, we're prepared to listen to them, and we're prepared to act on them. And that's the responsible thing to do on behalf of taxpayers in Medway, who risked, you know, having money wasted on a pet project from a previous regime, who were unwilling, unable, for whatever reason, to admit that times had changed. The world is a different place. The world is a different place from 50 days ago, never mind what it was 5 years ago, pre-COVID. So, you know, we absolutely have to react. I think it's fantastic, the opportunities that are presented in this report, the sort of businesses, not just BAE Systems, but the other businesses who will look at that vote of confidence in Medway and will respond to it, and also the opportunities for a care home, all the things that we have, again, that ambition for the people of Medway. Nothing's too good for the people of Medway, and again, this is an example of how this administration is delivering that.
Thank you very much, Alex. Nina, please.
What brilliant news. Thank you for sharing here. Yes, as exciting as it is, I also wanted to add on to our brilliant university here, University of Greenwich, which year on year brings out graduates, and they graduate at our magnificent Rochester Cathedral. And how wonderful would it be for us to keep that potential and that skill here in Medway, with a big partner that wants to harness Medway's potential even further. I already know that BAE Systems offer lots of brilliant graduate schemes, and hopefully that's going to be expanded even further. And hopefully some of our graduates, or many of our graduates from University of Greenwich here at Medway campus, will be able to benefit from that graduate scheme as well. But overall, such brilliant news. And once again, I think with regards to the potential that Medway holds, hopefully this is just a start, and other big organizations will also tap into it and harness what we have got to give here. So yeah, all around brilliant news. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. Before I go back to Harinder, just a few points from my perspective. Absolutely would echo the comments from other colleagues. Thank you to yourself, to Lauren, and to Simon for your work collaboratively and collectively on this. I think it's been vital. It was right. Let's recognise the facts. There are a couple of facts we haven't mentioned tonight, and we will recognise these. We, in opposition, want good jobs to come to Medway. We've wanted that since May 2023 as well, and now we're getting on with the job of delivering that. We also wanted a much greater level of scrutiny, which was rejected by the previous cabinet. And you can now kind of look back and go, well, why on earth did you do that? Because actually, if that had happened, maybe there would have been decisions taken much earlier than we will be taking tonight. We can't turn back that clock, but we can absolutely make sure that we do everything we can moving forward to build on that confidence that tonight will undoubtedly bring for the wider Medway community and the wider Medway economy. Alex beat me to quoting Ray Liotta. It's not Kevin Costner, it's Ray Liotta. If you build it, they will come. You didn't build it, previous administration, and they still didn't come. We are getting on with building it, and it's right to recognise, and you are respectful in the words that you used in opening this conversation, because I've had, as leader of this council, you've had in your portfolio, Lauren's had previously to that as well, Simon has as well, a number of private conversations with a number of organisations, key stakeholders to this community of ours, who spoke about the open and transparent way that this administration does business, not presuming we know everything, but we know that we want to get the best outcomes for the people of Medway, and how that's a different approach to perhaps one that we saw before May 2023. And with BAE Systems, look, as well documented, that organisation and its predecessors has got a long-standing track record for Medway. We're really proud of them, which is why when we've seen things come to this council chamber, perhaps criticising them, I understand the kind of rationale, but respectfully, I don't agree with that. And we want them to be a good partner. And I think we now more than ever are working with them to move forward on their ambitions. So supporting them in making sure they can move forward with their projects, being flexible in our approach. And I think that's critical with this, as a flexible approach, not saying it's this or nothing, you know, because I value those relationships. We all do as cabinet members. Those relationships are important, not to us as individuals, but to the outcomes it brings to our residents. And particularly, and you raised this point, Nina, you know, I've said this before, we've got 3 great universities in Medway, all delivering different courses, educational opportunities. I want to stop at the kind of congratulations on your graduation, getting on the train from Rochester and never coming back. I want to stop that, and nights like tonight make that much, much more likely. And it's not one single individual organisation, or in this case, that is a really helpful starting point. It's those dozens of medium-sized organisations, the hundreds and hundreds of SMEs who we are working with. Medway is open for business, and tonight's recommendations show that whether it's small or large, run directly by us in the sense of Care for Medway, or working with one of the biggest private sector employers in the South East, the fact that they continue to choose Medway as their home, they are choosing proactively to expand, and we're working with them, and that will take different phases as we go forward. It sends a very, very clear message. Medway's open for business. Harinder, back to you.
Thank you, Vince, and thank you to colleagues for all your comments there. I just want it to be made really clear that not for 1 second do I bemoan an attempt. I do not, think that actually trying to get the Innovation Park Medway up and running with the context with where we were in 2014 was a particularly bad idea. Actually, we all, supported it, and like Vince said, we wanted to see those high-quality jobs, and still do want to see those high-quality jobs in Medway. It's also really, really important for me to note there has been a lot of hard work from officers behind the scenes trying to make that happen from all levels, from officers at ground level all the way right up. And that is not lost. The issue that I'm having, or had, were around two things, both of which Vince has already mentioned. One is, if there had been that level of scrutiny offered, which wasn't, perhaps it could have gone differently. When we found out, and secondly, when it was found out that things weren't quite working, then it becomes incumbent on the political leaders of Medway to be able to say, actually, the new direction should be this, or at least let's find a new direction, let's make this work. And although there might have been some attempt to do that in 2019, there was, in my view, the effort wasn't there. And that lies squarely, in my view, on the previous administration, and that's where it lays. I also want to say that obviously, yes, this is all really good news. I'm really happy to announce what I've announced, but this is essentially almost like a restart again. So this is a beginning. No one's being triumphant about this. No one's saying that this is all done, signed, dusted, etc. We've had some good news. We've got a short lease from BAE Systems, with which that gives them the flexibility to be able to work with the factory in their current sort of footprint, but then that opens up further conversations, which is what we're looking for. And more importantly, with what Vince said, it surprises me how much can be achieved by just picking up the phone. And that's really key. So, and why that hasn't happened, that's the interesting thing for me. Not sort of, was it a folly? No, it's worth trying. It's just pick up the phone when it doesn't. Let's see what our options are, and that's where we've got to with this. And that, on that, it wasn't just one phone call. It wasn't just one person doing it. If Simon were here, if Councillor Curry were here, no doubt. And I've got no problem saying this, he would be leading this, talking about this conversation, because his input was instrumental to get us where we are. So really, really huge thanks to my colleague Simon Curry, who has really pushed it towards a more sustainable direction. And I mean that in all its senses. The future prospects, the future development of it should be sustainable, as well as transport and traffic. If he would here, I'm sure, be going through all the detail of a transport strategy about how it could work. And also, I know for a fact that all three MPs have spoken to BAE Systems in one way or another around this issue, and around exploring how this could work. They've all had input into that, and also my predecessor, who's currently an MP, but when Lauren Edwards had my portfolio, began this process as well and got it off the ground. So without our MPs and without our cabinet as we're constituted at the moment, it wouldn't have got to this point, but I'm at pains to say that this is just the starting point for us. Let's see where we get to. We've got a plan to get the development agreement within 2 years, and then in place with management working with a developer. So that's where our target is next, and no doubt I'll be opening up another item in the future, and I'll feel even older. But I move the recommendations as set out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cabinet, hard-working officers, MPs, private sector organisation, a genuine one Medway approach. Are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item, item 10, the property review of operational properties. Zoe, over to you.
Thank you. This report presents phase 2 of the property review in relation to operational property assets identified as suitable for being declared surplus and for disposal of or appropriated for other council uses following consultation with stakeholders, which will include the council's corporate landlord board. And this piece of work is a result of the financial position this administration found themselves in when it took control. It requires consultation concerning their future and results to be brought to future cabinet. And the report has been considered at Regen and Cultural Environment Overview and Scrutiny on the 26th of February to the report. It's recommended that Cabinet note the comments and declare surplus properties listed in paragraph 4.6 of the report and in more detail in the exempt appendices to the report. Authority will be delegated to the Director of Place in consultation with the Corporate Landlord Board to dispose of properties listed in paragraph 4.6 of the report. And further, Cabinet asks officers to undertake consultation concerning the future of properties at 4.7 of the report, which includes discussion with relevant parish councils and adjoining stakeholders regarding public toilets, and for these to remain available for public use. These results will then be brought to future cabinet meetings for decision, and the legal department will need to be authorised to conclude the contractual documentation. Cabinet is requested to note the progress of the property review, and these proposals will follow SIPFA's recommendations of January 2024 to generate revenue savings and capital receipts and avoid future capital spend on the properties. They will also create opportunities for private and third sector organisations to deliver more development, including housing. Disposals of any properties of a value exceeding £500,000 will be a matter for Cabinet, and those of a value greater than £1 million per property will be reported to Cabinet, and closure and cessation of any services is a matter for Cabinet. Such disposals with a value of over £1 million per property will be reported after completion to the full council for information. In phase 1, the focus was on non-operational and let properties, and on 24th of October 2024, Cabinet agreed just over £34.273 million worth of non-operational properties to be declared surplus and for disposal, with a financial provision of up to £400,000 per annum for up to 3 years to undertake those disposals. The Chief Executive has exercised his urgency powers for this provision to fund additional staffing resources to carry out the disposals, and 2 new officers have now joined the property team. The review of the operational portfolio includes 72 car parks and 792 other properties recommended for disposal. These properties were declared surplus at the Cabinet meeting on the 29th of October 2024, and the details of these are set out in the exempt appendices to the report. This was considered by the Corporate Landlord Board and CMT with their full agreement. Non-operational properties with an estimated value of over 37.273 million already identified for possible disposal when Cabinet authority was needed to authorise such disposal. The result is that some sales will arise in a reduction of rental income of 1.589 million, but more than covered by savings in debt interest of 2.707 million per annum once capital receipts from disposals are used to repay the debt. The net IRA gain of 1.118 million per annum. Over £600,000 worth of non-operational properties with a value of under 100,000 each have been identified, and these can be disposed of using delegated powers, including 19 assets where net rental income, 17,500 per annum, as against borrowing costs of some 48,700 per annum, with savings of £31,200 per annum. There are 6 car parks with a value of 1.1 million identified for disposal, with revenue savings of 12,500 per annum and a reduction in maintenance by nearly 4.3 million, as per the exempt item at Appendix 1. And 8 other operational properties with are identified for disposal or consultation on their future, which would give rise to savings of approximately 175,000 per annum and reduction of maintenance of around 366,000. Properties with a value of under 500,000 can be disposed of using officers' delegated powers. And it's recommended that Cabinet agrees properties recommended for declaration as surplus are set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Zoe, just to say, before we start this conversation, no one's indicated to me that we are looking to move into the blue paper, so I will work on the presumption that we're not going to. I don't want to kick out the masses that are here and switch off the feed. So no one's declared that to me, so I'm not seeing anyone waving their hands furiously. So let's continue. So I've got Nina first, then Teresa.
Thank you, Zoe, and to the officers for this report. Just from my portfolio with regards to heritage, I am thankful to the officers that further to the discussions about heritage assets, it is recommended in the report that particularly with regards to St. George's Centre, until we have carried out the audit of historic assets, and also explored all appropriate measures to secure the future of these assets, that St. George's Centre is not sold. And also with regards to Upnor Castle, it is by now public knowledge, because I think it did make headlines with regards to, when the list came out. I just want to make it absolutely clear that at this point in time, as per the report, we have sought some period for carrying out an initial consultation with English Heritage, and I'm very thankful to the officers for again taking that on board and making sure that that is properly recorded in the report. So just to make it also absolutely clear that the council will work with English Heritage to ensure that residents, whatever is the outcome of those discussions, will for Medway residents, we will be supporting the case for residents to continue to enjoy visiting this beautiful, timeless castle in Medway. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Teresa?
Thank you, and thank you for the tenacity and determination that you've shown over this report. And I'm very pleased, as Nina has said, that we've had strong opportunities to discuss with senior management officers how best to approach this, and remind everybody that for over a decade, the previous administration had a £4 million property disposal target every year that was never realised. And in part, that sort of laziness has led to some of the financial problems that we have had to work through today. That is very firmly in the past. There's determination behind this to put the council in good order, to get rid of assets that we can't use, to dispose of assets that are costing us too much money, and to put ourselves in a position where we're able to move forward as a result of making those disposals. And I want to reassure everybody in the community, you know, there will be proper consultation. The consultations will be listened to. We're very clear about that. But these are properties that have been through a proper process, and that disposing of them won't damage Medway. In fact, it will make things much easier and better for us to move forward on some of the new plans that we've got. It is a complicated process. I'm fully behind the fact that we've needed to engage more officers to help with this process. As was said in the previous item, we don't claim to know everything. It's good to involve experts and to get the best advice that we can. And we have got a very clear intention to monitor this carefully. Even those items that are under delegated authority, we're not taking our eye off the way this is moving. And I want also to reassure people that we've thought very carefully before putting the properties for disposal on this list about whether they could be used in any other way that benefits people in Medway, and come to a determination that that is not the case. And obviously, for the public toilets in control of parish councils, it's for them to take this on and move forward on behalf of their communities to make sure that they protect things that they feel the community needs. So it isn't an intention to overlook the views of parish councils, rather it's to enhance their responsibilities to get on with this along with everybody else. So thank you.
Thank you. Alex, please.
Thanks, Vince. So back in October, we had the sort of, as Zoe's mentioned, we had the first round of non-operational assets that were being identified as potentially surplus. And, you know, that was a process that led me, with apologies to Tam DL, it led me to my own West Lothian question, which was, why on earth do we own an industrial unit in Livingston, you know, in the outskirts of Edinburgh? And you know, answers on a postcard. But that sort of underlines that some of the decisions in that part of the process were a bit more straightforward. They were a bit further from home, a bit easier to take a dispassionate look at. And it's difficult as you get to operational assets. By definition, they're doing something at the moment. Are they doing enough? Are they doing the right thing for the people of Medway? Are they delivering value? Well, that's what this process is all about, identifying. But I have confidence in us as an administration, and with the reassurances that Zoe has given about the consultation process. You know, we are a group of councillors who, within our own communities, have put forward cases for declaring community assets of community value. You know, that's something that we genuinely recognise. I'm not aware of that being done by members of other political parties are available, but that's something that we have led on as a Labour and Co-Operative group. It's a cooperative party campaign, you know, that if you love it, you list it. So there are opportunities for people to do that, and to perhaps have first refusal if that's the outcome of the process. If there are assets which they are interested in taking on, whether that's parish councils or other community groups. So I just think that, in contrast to the way this might have been done by a different administration, I just want to finish, and Teresa certainly made the point, but you know, I don't think it can be laboured enough, because it's a follow-on from what Harinder was talking about at Innovation Park Medway, that had these decisions, if that £4 million a year target had been even attempted, if anything had been done in any of the preceding decade that that target existed, if they had pulled their finger out just once, then maybe the list wouldn't have to be as long as it is. Maybe we wouldn't be quite in the situation that the Conservative administration left us in. So if there are comments, and I'm sure there will be, and we saw this last time with certain of the usual suspects sort of making mischief about certain places that they find on these lists. I do hope that if any of that mischief making is coming from the Conservative benches, they will reflect on their utter abject failure to grip this for a decade. And, once again, we're the ones that are making the difficult decisions. We'll take the criticism. We'll no doubt get the criticisms on various things online. But the alternative is, an outcome that I certainly don't want to contemplate, which is financial oblivion. That is the potential alternative to not acting. Not acting was not an option, but for some reason the previous administration felt in a position to sit in their hands and leave these decisions to somebody else. Well, I think they should have done differently, but I'm glad that we are the administration who are in charge of making those decisions, because I know that we will do that in a rigorous way, consulting with the community, reflecting on the needs of the community, looking forward to future needs, and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I've got confidence that this process that Zoe has set out is the right approach. So I'll be supporting these recommendations.
Thank you very much, Alex. I can't see anybody else, so before I go back to Zoe, 3 or 4 quick points from myself. SIPFA said we should be doing this. So actually, regardless almost of what the previous administration failed to do, and Teresa, you are right, and we should never let people forget that actually if they'd done this work, if they'd taken frankly some difficult choices, lots of the financial situations that we find ourselves in now may have been different, but they didn't, and therefore we're getting on with it because it's the right thing to do. Difficult choices, but the right thing to do. I was really pleased to tune into the overview and scrutiny that looked at this after Nina's excellent session being held to account. And it was a very helpful debate, actually, and I think some important points were raised. One of the things to talk about in paragraph 4.7, which are the 4 properties which are in a different set of circumstances now, is that, of course, we don't own 3 of those, and the 4th one, as colleagues will rightly remember, is amongst the shopping centre, which we have already declared in the first set of properties. So there is a logic to say, let's join those 2 conversations up. We would never want to be, it feels private eye-esque to be in a situation where we would sell a whole shopping centre to one developer and a toilet block to a different developer who are doing different things. Blimey, let's not do that. So let's have a joined up conversation. Let's think about this logically, which is why I think that one in particular, it's right and appropriate. Just to think about how we do that. Of course, it is right that they were on different reports, and that's the nature of looking at operational and non-operational properties. Of course, we can't technically dispose of what we don't own, and particularly with Upnor Castle. Upnor Castle has been there for hundreds of years. The local government of Upnor, of which we are the custodians for the last 27 years, have only managed it for most of the last 27 years, plus a little bit beforehand. For hundreds of years before then, it wasn't managed by the council. So I think it is right and appropriate. At this point, we're having these reviews of all of our property, even for those that we kind of have a management interest in, that we have that conversation, respectful, positive, and I know Nina, working with her hard-working officers in the portfolio, those conversations have already started, they're ongoing. So, and they're important because, again, it's about making sure we're doing the right thing, at the time when actually it is ultimately appropriate from a financial improvement and transformation perspective, that we're having these conversations. And then just the only other couple I would pick up on specifically in paragraph 4.6, because again, these came up particularly at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, on the St George's Centre, and Nina is absolutely right, this beautiful building, which respectfully to everybody in it tonight, is not the best place for holding meetings. It is echoey in here. Hopefully people watching online, we're not hearing the echo so much, but it's echoey. It's either too hot or too cold. It's not the Goldilocks of buildings. It's one of the other bears. But it's got some really important, just looking around, you can see the heritage here. So it is right that we take that time just to understand what do all of these things mean. I think it's fair to say there would probably be quite a limited market in that. There are one or two obvious key Medway stakeholders who might want to have a conversation with us. And we'll, of course, have that conversation in a best value or the due diligence ways that you would anticipate. And on Hopewell Drive, because again, it's right to recognise, and I think, again, I welcome the fact that Scrutiny actually took one of the tenants from Hopewell Drive as a contribution. Very good to hear from them. Again, don't be afraid of scrutiny. It's a good thing. And so, yeah, the absolute clarity that the ideal ambition will be that that is effectively sold as an ongoing concern, so that people who can stay there will continue with their leases, and then obviously it will be for the new owner to, when leases come to a conclusion, to have those conversations. Two of the building rooms at the moment are housing our trade unions, and that's a long-standing agreement, actually going back to, they were at Gillingham, and then they were moved to the White House in Chatham, and then when that was needed for the dynamic bus facility at the time, they were moved to Hopewell Drive. Actually, because from their perspective, and HR are supportive of this, lots of members want to be outside of the main headquarters if they need to have that, particularly for personal cases, that individual conversation. So I know there's dialogue, particularly with Unison and the GMB. I should probably declare an interest as a GMB member to make sure that that is done in the right and appropriate way. But that is no different to any other council who has recognition agreements and facilities time and facilities space. So any indication, which I think one or two Conservative councillors maybe hinted at the scrutiny meeting, this is perfectly normal industrial relations for one of the biggest employers in Medway to be, treating their trade unions as partners in a respectful way. But that doesn't mean that we can't deal with that building, in the way that we should be, and that's very clear here. So just to put those things on the record very clearly. So look, some of these are difficult choices, and the whole table on paragraph 4.6 lays those out. Of course, by declaring them surplus, it doesn't mean we've got a queue outside St George's Centre waiting for people with checkbooks in hand. There'll be some difficult negotiation, discussion. Officers will lead on that in that good and professional way. And of course, we'll be kept updated through you, Zoe, as that programme continues. So I'll be very happy to support the recommendations tonight. Zoe, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. Straightforwardly, we have no choice than to dispose of these properties following the directions or guidance that we received from SIPFA. So we have to do this. And I guess reassurance on the items at point 2 regarding these historical buildings up Castle, that I'm sure that property is not at risk in any way by virtue of being on this list, and it, as the paper says, we don't own that property anyway. So I ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are those recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. That then moves us on to agenda item 11, 3 Gateway 3 contract award items, starting with the Deprivation of Liberties Safeguards Assessment, the DoLS. Teresa, over to you.
Thank you, Vince, and for everybody on the Cabinet. This is the third time you will have seen each of these. That's the proper process. for commissioning these important services. First of three, the Deprivation of Liberty Safeguards Assessment. We're asking you to, and I can say at the outset, I'm not intending to go into the exempt papers for this thing, awarding the contract to the provider named at 2.2.1 in the exempt appendix, evaluated as the most advantageous against the Council's award criteria. It's important to say that this is an extremely specialist service. It has taken much longer to bring this back than we thought because of government legislation that was enacted in Parliament as part of the Mental Capacity Act amendment in 2019 called the Liberty Protection Safeguards, which was intended to replace the Deprivation of Liberty Safeguards that we're talking about tonight. But it was decided in 2023 that the implementation of the Liberty Protection Safeguards would be delayed beyond the lifetime of this Parliament, and this Parliament has continued with that. So that is something that won't be happening. It did hold up this process. I haven't got anything further to add, so I'm asking for Cabinet support to award the contract, please.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Any member on that? I say it's quite a technical contract, and again, with that wider legislation, so very happy to support that. Thank you, Teresa. I don't know if there's anything else. Happy to support that recommendation. Thank you, Teresa. The next item then, please.
The second one then at item 12, a Gateway 3 contract award for Medway Integrated Sexual Health Services, including HIV treatment services. Again, this is something that has taken longer than we wanted it to. It's not a particularly high-value contract, but it is an extremely important one. And the issue here was that we didn't have other providers coming forward to take the contract because it's so specialist. So a decision has been taken to award the contract to the incumbent provider. Now, that is not because there were any issues about performance, but it had to go through some special processes because of the reasons that I've just said. Other people were not coming forward, and the risk to not having the sexual health services in place is very high to the health of our community. So I'm pleased to say that's come to a conclusion now. We're satisfied with the incumbent's delivery of the current contract and confident they can deliver against new service requirements, which were probably what was making it difficult to attract other providers to this contract. So again, if I can ask your support for this award, please.
Thank you, Teresa. Really critical services, so very happy to support that. Is the recommendation agreed? Thank you. And then, Teresa, third and final Gateway 3 report.
Third and final, this is for our community equipment service. And when it was going through the process, people will have heard me mention before that we went through a special pre-commissioning event, which meant that anybody interested could come into the arena, talk with our officers about what was required of this contract, critical to maintaining people's independence in their own homes, the provision of community equipment, and to helping people get re-abled if they come out of hospital having had an accident or an illness or a deterioration in a long-term condition. Great deal of work went on to that pre-application process, which led to some really interesting partnership working to make this service work. And a special feature of it is that it will be a 60-month contract term with the option to extend for 2 further 24-month extensions dependent on performance. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. It's critical that we have continuity for this service. And for those people who don't know much about it, if you do get an opportunity, go and visit our community equipment service. They are absolutely fantastic in terms of being committed to sustainability, to making sure that everything they do is environmentally compliant. And, you know, it's a really good example of where people from different backgrounds, many of them from more traditional types of engineering, join this service and really enjoy and get a huge amount of reward in maintaining and providing equipment for people that makes those people's lives better. It's a very good example of the way that you can transfer your skills, and huge commitment to recycling, cleaning, getting the equipment back with the help of our voluntary sector partners so that anybody who needs it doesn't have to wait very long. So I'm really pleased that we're finally in a position to award the contract, and I thank everybody in commissioning and procurement for the work that they've done to bring this to us today.
Thank you, Teresa. And of course, this is an issue which in other parts of England, this sort of contract has caused problems at points. So the fact that we've got, you know, that clear, effectively, potentially anything up to a 9-year commitment, subject to performance, of course, I think sends that clear message that this is here for the long term, and it's about, you know, those who have to use that equipment having that peace of mind that it's not going to be a different provider every other time they go along to get an update, etc. So very happy to support that. I can't see any other colleagues, so are colleagues happy to agree that final recommendation? Agreed. Thank you very much and have a good rest of your evening. Thanks, everybody.